Welcome to Right Now with Scrivener, where writers talk about how they work, how they develop their ideas, and how they use Scrivener, the app built for long-form writing projects. I'm your host, Kirk McElhearn, author of Take Control of Scrivener. Today I'm very happy to welcome Maria Reva, who is the author of Endling. At the time we're recording this, Endling is longlisted for the Booker Prize. We'll talk about this a little bit later. Endling is an absurdist road trip, a heist novel, a postmodern metafiction about snails, romance tours, and the war in Ukraine. Did I get that right?
That's right. Thank you, Kirk.
You are actually, well, we're talking to you from Canada, but you're Ukrainian, yet you live in Canada. How did you get from one place to the other? Don't tell me you flew. That's too obvious.
Yes. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I was thrilled to be asked because I love Scrivener so much. In terms of my immigration story, I was 7 years old when we immigrated from Ukraine to Canada. And why did we choose Vancouver? My dad had this children's atlas, and it was illustrated children's atlas, and he saw that in Vancouver there were mountains and beaches very close together, so he thought you could ski and swim in the same day. So that is how we landed in Vancouver.
Do you like it?
I love Vancouver. Except it's this gem that nobody can really afford here, so it's a love-hate relationship, let's just say.
You have a character in a novel whose life story is a bit like yours, Pasha, and he left when he was 9 years old, and he kind of regretted going there, and he didn't even speak Ukrainian, and he eventually goes back. I want to start with, first of all, what is Endling? Define that.
Right. So the term Endling, it's a scientific term, and it means the last surviving member of a species. So after that organism dies, that's it for the entire species. That branch of evolution gets snipped off. I've also heard of this term Endling ache. So it's when you feel like you're the last member of a lineage. So say if you're the last person to speak a language, or you're the last person to remember a person who is deceased. So when you die, that person is then truly deceased in memory. So it's actually a pretty widely applicable term. Yeah.
That's interesting. It's actually about snails. Why snails? I've learned more about snails in this book than anything I've ever read.
Right. Why snails? Well, I was reading this I was already a year into my manuscript, and I was writing about the romance tour industry. So to backtrack a little bit, the romance tour industry, this used to happen in Ukraine before the full-scale invasion, where these marriage agencies would bring in men from all over the world into Ukraine, and it's kind of sold on this promise that they would find the perfect docile bride there, as if feminism hadn't made it into Ukraine. So there would be these romantic itineraries, say like 10 days, for example, where there would be a lot of speed dating and social activities. And at the end of the 10 days, you were supposed to find your perfect bride. And I wanted to focus on 13 of these men who have the unfortunate luck of being kidnapped by 3 of the women who take part in these tours, who are actually not there to marry, and they're there to bring the entire industry down and its exploitative practices.
This is the part where I said it's a heist novel. It's like they're planning how to get these men into the back of this trailer, which is full of snails, or, well, I don't want to say what happened to the snails, but what authors influenced you in this? There's this absurdism in here that seems to be, I don't know, who are your influences that make you think like this?
So specifically for the snails, the influence was the journalist Ed Young, and he wrote this beautiful article for The Atlantic called The Last of Its Kind. And it was about a biologist in Hawaii who was taking care of snail endlings. So he was watching species disappear through his hands. And apparently this program is doing much better now, but at the time the article was written, it was just, I found it really, really heartbreaking. So I wanted to, I was already writing about the romance tours, and here were these snail endlings that I was so fascinated with, and the kind of mental toll they take on the people who take care of them. So I thought, how do I combine 2 things I want to write about into one novel? And that is how, one of the brides that takes part in the tours, she's actually a snail conservationist, and she's taking care of these snails in her lab. And yeah, of course, she's not doing too well. The lab ends up being empty, and then she gets coerced into this kidnapping scheme, and that's how her lab is then full of 13 men. So there was Ed Young, of course. I also love this book by Salvador Plasencia. It's called The People of Paper. And he begins by writing one type of premise. And then he undergoes a really terrible heartbreak in real life. And the entire book is derailed. And it becomes metafictional. It's about his own heartbreak and how does he continue writing the story. The ex-girlfriend ends up being a character in the novel. So I thought, okay, if this guy can pull it off, maybe I can try something like this with my novel when its original premise of the kidnapping heist and the snails was derailed by Russia's full-scale invasion.
When did you start writing this?
I started writing the novel in 2018. I was working on other projects as well at the time, but yeah, it was basically 4 years into this novel when Russia launched its full-scale invasion, and my relatives in Ukraine called our family here in Canada saying they were hearing explosions in their cities. And at the time, I gave up on my novel. I thought, how can I possibly keep writing this if its setting is being destroyed in real time? So I gave up on it for a while, and then because these questions kept circulating in my mind about what is my role as an artist in such calamitous times, how do I keep writing this book when its premise doesn't feel right to me anymore? And how do we keep living in the West while watching these atrocities abroad? So because I kept thinking about all these questions, and of course my relatives in Ukraine, I figured, you know what, maybe I'll try to fold this into the fabric of the novel itself and make it the book.
So I didn't read your book. I listened to the audiobook. And it was really interesting because in the introduction, you say something to the effect that there's going to be a point where the book ends, but it doesn't end. Keep listening. And it's about halfway through, right? And so it's at this point that you insert yourself, you do the fourth wall thing, and you start talking about your problems writing this book. You're talking about the invasion, about your grandfather in Ukraine, etc. And it feels that it just became so personal that while you still have the main plot going on, all of a sudden, I'm thinking she's right there over my shoulder. In fact, it was your voice on the audiobook. The audiobook was brilliantly done with two narrators plus yourself. And it made it so much more personal, even though I'm thinking a lot of readers, they read this, they don't know what's going on if they're, used to sort of standard literary fiction.
Right. That was a conversation we had to have with the director about how to address that derailment in the middle of the book. Because when you're reading the paper book, I mean, without giving too much away, the book ends halfway through, and it's kind of this fake ending. And if you're reading the physical copy, you know to keep turning the page because there's still half of a book left in your hands, even though there's several blank pages like any book that ends, right? But then you keep flipping through the blank pages, and here you go, the book restarts in a totally different way. But with the audiobook, well, we couldn't just go into silence and expect people to keep listening and, have the credits rolling, because any listener would likely think, okay, this is when I turn this off. So we decided to put that little disclaimer at the beginning that, keep listening when you think you should stop. And yeah, we had to tailor the book in multiple ways to the audio version to make those kind of more experimental parts of it translate well into audio. Are you saying that you changed the print version to match the audio version? We kept the print version as it was, but we changed a few things in the audio version. For example, the acknowledgements are a lot shorter in the audio version because, again, there's this risk that the reader or the listener will turn off the audiobook at that point. I think a lot of people actually don't listen to acknowledgements, but with the physical book, you're supposed to keep reading. So we wanted to get through the acknowledgements quickly to keep the pace going of the audio version. There is a page read about the font and the designer of the font, which is quite humorous. This is not a real person, I assume, or a real font, is it? Yes. So at the end of most books, you have this thing called a note on the type, right? So it's when the typesetter gets to have their moment of glory and they get to tell you about the font they chose for the book and the history of that font. And because the book has this fake ending, I wanted it to be true to what an ending might be like. So I put in that note about type myself and I made it up myself. It was a lot of fun to do that, honestly.
So you're a funny person. How do you manage? What did it feel like to write a mostly humorous novel, which is set in this time of war?
Yes. So when I say fun ride, of course, whatever fun there is, it's more of a dark humor. And it's the kind of humor that I see in a lot of Ukrainians and in my own family where really, really difficult circumstances are processed through this biting humor. And it's been a survival mechanism, throughout Ukrainian history, because it is a difficult history. In the book, this is also mentioned about how at the very beginning of the full-scale invasion, I was commissioned by a media outlet to write an op-ed about the war as a person born in Ukraine, now watching the war from abroad. And I wanted to write about that wartime humor that I was seeing coming out of Ukraine and from my relatives who were hunkering down in their cellars and basements. So yeah, they were still cracking jokes even despite or because of the circumstances. And I wanted to write about that specific type of humor. But the magazine editors felt like it was too soon and that I shouldn't write about humor. And I shouldn't write about the war in a humorous way. So I wanted to have my little rebellion, I suppose. I wanted to keep writing about the war the way I saw fit, and the way that my family processes the war as well. It's through this kind of lens.
And so the editor at the magazine will have read your book and read your reaction to their reaction with this conversation with them and the conversation with your agent, etc. Have they gotten back to you? Have they emailed you about this?
I'm not sure if the editor of the magazine has actually read the letters. I'm not sure. Parts of them are fictionalized. the gestalt of it is true, but part of it is fictionalized. I'm not sure if they'll recognize themselves in it. So, I have the same question as you. Yes. But my editors at Doubleday were always hugely in support of this kind of tone. And I'm so lucky to be able to work with them. Yeah.
In a way, it doesn't seem like publishers today are interested in fiction of this type that breaks so many rules. Did you have to fight for anything that an editor said, no, we can't do this? Or, this is your first novel. You have only published one book before, which was a book of short stories. So it wasn't like you were a best-selling novelist already.
I had such a wonderful experience working with my publishers, and they did not stop me. In fact, they encouraged me to experiment with this form. I think that fiction is actually aching to break apart right now because we are having trouble making sense of our reality and how to even fit it into art. So I think the normal containers we have used in the past for art are about to be stretched open again, much like after the First World War with the Dadaist movement.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about Endling, and then we're going to talk about how you use Scrivener. Writing a book, screenplay, or even a long article is a juggling act. You need to find the right words and the right structure, keep track of research, and refer to notes. Tailor-made for long writing projects, Scrivener is the go-to app for writers of all types. Scrivener combines a typewriter, binder, and corkboard in a single app. A project outline makes it easy to get an overview of your work and flip between sections. Refer to research alongside your writing, and just drag and drop to rearrange your work. Write in any order in sections as large or small as you like, and let Scrivener stitch it all together when you're ready to share your words with the world. With Scrivener, you'll find everything you need to start writing and keep writing. Scrivener is available for Mac, Windows, iPad, and iPhone. Download the free trial from scrivenerapp.com. Right now, with Scrivener listeners can get a 20% discount with the coupon code PODCAST. That's scrivenerapp.com. Okay, so we're recording this at the end of August. You're currently longlisted for the Booker Prize. On September 23rd, they announced the shortlist, and then I believe it's November 5th or November 10th that they announced the prize. So I'm going to ask you two questions. How does it feel to be longlisted for the Booker Prize?
It feels incredible. I'm super honored and grateful. This is such a personal story. I did not think that it would have such a wide audience. I wrote it because it was such a difficult book to write, and I gave up on it multiple times. My entire goal with it was just to finish the thing. I didn't have much expectation beyond that. So now, with the attention the book is getting and the kinds of reviews it's been getting, it all just feels like a huge, huge bonus. And it feels, I'm just very honored and very touched that readers have been receptive to what I'm trying to do in the book. Yeah.
Which reminds me to mention how we discovered that you use Scrivener. It was through this Facebook post that the Booker Prize people put up with photos of each author's working environment. And some of them are, I don't know, what would you say? Some of the authors had a stylist come in to make the photo look like, here's my notebook on a bench outside in a park, or here's my writing nook by a window in Brooklyn. And yours was this picture of a MacBook on a stand, on a book on a box, with a clipboard in front of the keyboard with handwritten notes on it.
Yes.
But yours looks like you're really working. There were a couple others like that too, but there was one who had strategically placed books like by Rousseau and Thomas Bernhard to show the influences around the computer. But yours looks like you're working right there.
Yeah, I wanted to show the mess of my work. I mean, maybe the other writers, that is truly how beautiful their office looks all the time. And I really, really admire that, and I strive for that. But I wrote this book in my parents' attic because I was living with my family at the time. And that's just what my desk looked like. And so, yeah, I would have all these paper notes stuck to my laptop. So these would be ideas for sentences or scenes that I would think up while I'd be walking around. And then I would put them on little pieces of paper, and then I would transfer them via Scrivener into my manuscript. And I think on that photo, you can see that on the screen, it's a Scrivener program that's open.
Well, that's why I said that's how we knew that you used Scrivener. Someone spotted that and told the Scrivener people, and that's why I contacted you immediately. So this podcast is being released early October. The shortlist for the Booker Prize will have been announced on September 23rd. How do you feel to be shortlisted for the Booker Prize?
Well, we'll have to see if I do get shortlisted. I'm just trying not to look that far ahead, honestly. But it feels, to be on the long list already feels like all 13 of us have won the prize, honestly, because it's been such a wild ride.
Especially for a first novel.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm just happy where I'm at. Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about how you use Scrivener. You emailed me saying, I can't tell you how much I love Scrivener. How long have you been using Scrivener? You started this, you said, in 2017.
So I started this novel in 2018, and I believe I started it on a Word document.
Oh.
But it felt really clunky at the time. And my sister, who's a composer, Anna Podgorna, she was the one who introduced me to Scrivener because she had written her dissertation on Scrivener. And why it worked so well for me is just, this ability to have these chunks of text that you can toggle between so easily, and you can rearrange those sections very easily just by dragging them. And I mean, there's just so many features I love. For example, the fact that you can color code and choose your icons for each section, right? So I have I have 3 different characters in this book whose perspectives you switch between. So every time they're there's a Pasha section, I have him in yellow. Every time there's a Nastya section, I have that in pink, and Yeva is in blue. So I can see really easily, oh, there's a lot of blue. It seems like I haven't switched to Nastya for a while, or I've forgotten about Nastya. So it got me to balance out the perspectives a little bit more. And also, when I'm working on a scene and I want to experiment with something in that scene, right? I want to push it in a slightly different direction, but I don't want to delete the old scene, right? So what I do is I just duplicate that scene and I have the two scenes side by side on the screen. So I copy out the original, like I type it out, and then I try the thing in the scene. And if it works, then great. If it doesn't, then it goes into my special folder, also on Scrivener, which is called snippets or cutaways. So I have this long folder. So just in case I change my mind about something, it's really easy to take it from the cutaways folder.
Don't ever throw anything away.
No.
You said when you do that, you retype the whole scene.
Yeah. So sometimes, not every time, but if I really want to get at the sentences, I do retype the scene so that none of the words I take for granted, I actually have to think about them as I type them and have they earn their place. Sometimes I change the font. So the earlier I am in my drafting process, the less I try to make the page look like a published page. So I use, the Courier font, so the one that looks like a typewriter. Right. And not because I have a particular fondness for typewriters, but you don't see books published in that font. So that way I'm not comparing it to anything publishable. I'm just, my expectations are lowered. I'm more free to play around with it. And then as I go through the drafting process, I make it look more polished on the page. So I end up changing the font to something, I don't know, Times New Roman. I guess Garibond is one.
Yeah,
it looks
Garamond.
it's very serify. It's distinguished.
Yeah.
So when I have text in those fonts, it makes my standards much higher for every word.
What's interesting is what some people will do is when they've written their manuscript, they'll do it in one font and then they'll print it out in a different font to read it on paper because you're looking at something that's totally different. Your eye's used to the font on the screen. And when you see it on paper in a different font, it's like it's a different book. And you'll notice things you didn't notice because of that.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of the revision process is tricking yourself into being an editor of a manuscript you don't know. So as fresh as you can make it for yourself, the better. So either putting it away in a drawer for a few months or just making it look different on the page or printing it out. Some authors even read their draft, they record that reading and then they listen back to it. And then because you can catch more things in a different medium. So there's a lot of different techniques for how to be your own editor.
So you did a lot of research for this book, at least about snails. Did you stuff it all into Scrivener's research folder?
Let's see. I'm just scrolling down. I have a research folder. That's right. And there's a big folder that is labeled snails. There's a big folder that is labeled marriage agencies. And of course, then the war itself. There's sub-files that are labeled sounds, language, names, sources, just a lot of different miscellaneous stuff that is put into these folders. Yeah.
A book like this does need a lot of research. Obviously the snail stuff, but you still have to make sure that what you're talking about, places and the way buildings look, that all that matches. Yeah,
there's a lot of detail work and research that is involved. Yes. One of the very dark parts of writing this novel was the kind of footage I watched of the war. There is this website called Live Maps, and it tracks the war from day by day. And if you click on a certain day, it'll show you a map And on that map, you will have these geolocated videos from civilian phones. So any footage that any civilian captured and uploaded on some sort of a social media website would then be displayed on this map. And as you can imagine, some of the footage was really, really quite graphic.
So you've got these four main characters. I noticed that, as I mentioned earlier, the Pasha character is sort of you because he moved from Ukraine to Canada. You mentioned earlier about this snail person in Hawaii who actually is one of the characters in the novel. We don't see him. He's just texting and calling Yeva. It was very late in the novel that I learned that Yeva is Eve in Ukrainian. Is this some sort of symbolism?
Well, I already had the name Yeva just because I liked that name for her. And then I realized, yeah.
But it's like your last name.
Oh, right. Reva.
Just with one letter different.
Yes, that's right. But pretty late in the novel, it kind of hit me that, oh, yeah, she's Eve.
It's a Russian soldier who mentions it.
Yeah, it's a Russian soldier who mentions it. And yeah, it's this kind of irony that the original woman who you could say populated the earth has the same name as Yeva, who is actually one of the least romantic people you might ever meet, who has no interest in having children or family of her own,
but who's also trying to save the last snail.
It's true. Yes, she is. So
because part of the road trip is that she spots a snail photobombing a picture of a kid saving his pet rat as he's evacuating someplace in Kherson, I think. And she has to drive 600 kilometers to find that snail to mate with a snail that she's got in the back of her truck.
Yes. Yes. So it goes to show that, different minds operate differently in crisis. And that's one of the things I wanted to explore in this book. So Yeva is probably the least functional character at the beginning of the book. Before the full-scale invasion, she has failed. She senses that she has failed in her mission to take these snail species back from the brink of extinction. She's drinking alone in her lab. She wants to end her life. And then when the full-scale invasion hits, she's actually one of the most functional characters of the book, where she springs into action and her entire focus is on saving this last species that she can save. So different minds functioning differently under crisis.
And she manages to convince Nastya and Salemia to go with her, who didn't want to, and brings them over to her side after they brought her to their side with the kidnapping plot.
Yes.
We don't want to give away too much, but it's really, there is an interesting interplay among the characters here. And in all good novels, characters change and grow. And Pasha is one of the ones who changes the most, but I won't say anything about that when it comes at the end with Pasha. I like to ask my guests if they have a book that they would recommend to our listeners, either something you've read recently or one of your favorite books.
Let's see.
You're looking on the desk to see which book is holding up your MacBook, but in the picture it was a Roget's Thesaurus. So
there's so many books that I could think of right now. I recently read Clam Down by Annalise Chen, and actually came out the same day as my book. And it is a memoir that is also experimenting with its own form. So it's a memoir about a woman who undergoes a divorce and she turns into a clam. So she clams up and you don't know if it's a symbol or she really turns into a clam. Like, how far are we going with the symbolism? And I think it's just really beautifully done. And some of the chapters are even written through the perspective of her father, even though she's writing them. But you don't normally see that in memoir writing. So I just think it's really, really beautifully done. Yeah.
So this book, if it came out a few months ago, you submitted it more than a year ago. What have you been working on since then? Are you working on another novel, or are you in this sort of limbo trying to decide where to go? And now that you have the Booker Prize looming over you, you're frozen in terror until it's announced.
So when my first book was published, I knew that by the time it was published, I wanted to be already thick into my next project, kind of as a way to not put too much expectation on the first book, to already be putting the eggs in a different basket and focused on something else. And I thought that I would be doing that with this book. I thought, okay, by the time this book comes out, I want to be immersed in my next project. But I This time I just feel like I want to rest during this process and enjoy the public part of a novel's publication, the part where I actually get to engage with readers, because it's so isolating to work on a book, right? Again, you're just in a room by yourself. And now I get to be on the road and I get to talk to people who've read the book and hear their perspectives on it and how the characters have impacted them. So I think I just want to soak that in, because it really does counteract the isolation. Yeah.
Okay, Maria Reva, author of Endling, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Kirk. It's been a pleasure.
If you enjoyed the podcast, please follow it in Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. To learn more about Scrivener, go to scrivenerapp.com. Join us next month for another conversation on Right Now with Scrivener.